Shrek didn't just grow older, he aged with us. From a crude ink sketch in a weird 90s book to the CGI face of our childhood DVDs and meme folders, this ogre has been rebuilt again and again, and somehow always feels like home. Let's get into his evolution over 36 years. Picture book to CGI. Before the movies, Shrek starts life in 1990 as a strange, proudly ugly picture book ogre, drawn in thick lines and muddy colors that lean into gross out humor more than nuanced character. In that original book, the flat illustrations and exaggerated features sell him as a walking punchline, not a fully realized person. When DreamWorks adapts him into the 2001 film, the evolution is immediate. Shrek becomes a fully 3D, physically grounded ogre with layered skin shaders, visible pores, and cloth that actually creases and swings as he moves. The studio leans on three-point lighting and detailed shadow work to make his swamp feel like a real, damp space. Mist on the water, soft light through trees, and campfire underlighting that casts creepy shadows up his face when he tries to scare people away. Narratively, the first film frames him as a loner who weaponizes his ugliness, but visually it keeps placing him in wide shots where he dominates the frame, towering over tiny villagers and cluttered fairy tale refugees. By the time he lets Fiona and Donkey into his swamp, the staging shifts. More medium shots, more characters sharing the screen, and a warmer, less harsh lighting palette inside his home, quietly reflecting his first step from monster to hero. 4D rides and early shorts. After that first happily ever after, Shrek doesn't disappear back into the swamp. The franchise immediately tests how this new CGI asset can live outside the original movie. Shrek in the Swamp Karaoke Dance Party takes the same models and rigs from the film, but pushes them into looser, more cartoony motion. Bigger lip sync on pop songs, and exaggerated dance loops, and bright party-style lighting that turns the once moody swamp into a stage. The gig isn't just that Shrek is singing. It's that a character carefully animated for cinematic realism is suddenly cutting loose like a music video extra. Shrek 4D then throws him into a different medium entirely. A 4D theme park ride where his 3D animation is synced with moving seats, bursts of air, water sprays, and in-theater effects. The short film bridges the gap between movies, but technically it evolves Shrek into an immersive character. His lunges, falls, and dragon chases are timed to physically shake the audience, turning his body language and slapstick into something you actually feel in your seat. Even his appearances on DVD covers and fridge magnets mark another kind of evolution. The design is simplified and flattened just enough to work on merch, proving his silhouette is now strong enough to survive being shrunk, printed, and plastered everywhere. Shrek 2's Hollywood Glow. Shrek 2 drags Shrek from swamp mud to palace marble, and the animation tools level up to match that jump. DreamWorks upgrades the lighting pipeline with global illumination, letting light bounce naturally off gold towers, glass carriages, and polished armor in Far, Far Away. Shrek's green skin now sits in richer environments. He reflects pinks from fancy curtains, warm glow from candlelit banquets, and cool blues from nighttime city streets, visually underlining how out of place he is in this ultra-glossy fairy tale Hollywood. Character animation also becomes more nuanced. Facial rigs get more articulation, so Shrek's insecurity shows up not only in dialogue, but in tiny eye shifts, jaw tension, and the way his shoulders curl in whenever he walks past perfectly groomed nobles. The hero potion sequence literalizes his evolution by temporarily redesigning him as a tall, smooth human hero, with slimmer proportions, softer lighting, and a more conventional leading man silhouette, then snapping him back to his heavier, rougher ogre body to make the visual point that the wrong shape is actually his truest form. Third film, bigger world. By Shrek the Third, the world and cast expand, and the animation tech flexes to handle it. The film introduces new character rigs with improved facial animation and more complex cloth and hair simulation, especially on the princesses and background crowds. Scenes at Worcestershire Academy and on the ship pack dozens of characters into a single frame, and Shrek is no longer the only visually complex model on screen. His design has to hold its own among flowing capes, bouncy hair, and more dynamic crowd movement. Story-wise, Shrek is freaking out about kingship and babies, and the film visualizes that anxiety in how it stages him. Cramped in royal outfits that don't quite fit, dwarfed by oversized thrones, and swarmed by hyperactive ogre infants in nightmare sequences that crank up the cartoony squash and stretch beyond anything in the first movie. The contrast between the polished, sunlit kingdom and his chaotic inner visions turns his emotional panic into a literal visual mess on screen. TV Holiday Shrek. When the franchise moves into TV specials like Shrek the Halls, the evolution is not just in story, but in format and presentation. These half-hour episodes are built for broadcast, which means slightly simpler staging, brighter color grading, and a faster joke rhythm to fit a TV time slot. Christmas sequences lean into warm, saturated reds and golds, soft glows and cozy interiors that echo classic holiday specials, while still reusing the feature quality models. So you get a hybrid of big screen assets with small screen pacing. Shrek's need to control Christmas shows up visually in how the special frames his perfect setup. Carefully arranged decorations, symmetric table layouts, and storybook-style title pages that literally tell him how to do each step. The moment chaos hits, the camera cuts get faster, compositions get messier, and the house fills with overlapping movement from multiple characters, turning his emotional loss of control into a noisy TV-style party that looks nothing like the lonely swamp of 2001. Broadway Ogre. Shrek the Musical evolves the character again by translating him into physical theater. The Broadway version replaces digital skin and lighting with prosthetics, makeup, and practical costumes, forcing designers to rethink what Shrek means when you can't rely on subsurface scattering or detailed textures. His bulk is communicated through padding and silhouette, his iconic vest becomes fabric that wrinkles in real time, and stage lighting creates swamp atmospheres with gels and gobos instead of CGI fog. The musical builds a new backstory, like young Shrek being sent out by his parents, which is staged through songs and choreography rather than keyframe animation. Where the films use close-ups to show tiny micro-expressions, the stage version leans on bigger gestures and blocking, evolving Shrek into a character whose emotions have to read from the balcony without a single rendered pixel. Dark Timeline Shrek. Shrek Forever After pushes the series into an alternate timeline story, and the visuals shift accordingly. Compared to the warmer tones of earlier films, the Rumpelstiltskin-ruled world uses harsher contrasts, cooler shadows, and more saturated magical effects, giving the imagery a slightly darker fantasy edge. The Ogre Resistance Camp, the warped Duloc, and the contract scroll sequences all take advantage of the studio's matured global illumination pipeline to layer fog, torchlight, and moonlit skies over more complex environments. Character designs also evolve to fit the new reality. Fiona gets a battle-ready look with armor and a more muscular posture. Puss becomes an overweight house cat with looser body physics and slower reactions. And even Shrek's own animation leans into heavier impacts and more desperate movement as he fights against a timeline that is literally tearing him away. The film externalizes his midlife crisis by putting the old, feared ogre into a sharper, more dangerous visual world, then gradually warming the palette and easing the compositions as he earns his way back to his noisy, imperfect family. Halloween Shrek. The Halloween specials, especially Scared Shrekless, shift Shrek into full genre parody mode. These TV stories use an anthology structure with different visual styles for each horror spoof. Foggy graveyards lit with spooky greens, crooked camera angles in haunted house segments, and deliberately overdramatic shadows that mimic classic horror movies while staying kid-friendly. Backgrounds are still richly colored, but the framing gets tighter and more claustrophobic during ghost stories, literally drawing the audience in like a campfire circle. Shrek himself evolves from the object of fear to its playful director. The animation exaggerates his boo moments with bigger mouth shapes, jump scare sound cues, and sudden push-ins, then undercuts them with goofy follow-through as his kids laugh instead of scream. The same roar that once sent villagers running now serves as a punchline in a horror pastiche, showing how the franchise has learned to remix its own visual language. Web shorts and talks. As the 2010s and 2020s roll on, Shrek starts showing up in shorter formats like web shorts and talk-style bits, and his presentation adapts to match internet culture. These pieces often reuse the core models but simplify backgrounds, lean on flatter lighting, and push quicker, snappier animation cycles suited for social clips rather than cinematic storytelling. The camera sits closer like a vlogger setup, with Shrek addressing the audience almost directly, trading epic quest compositions for medium shots that feel more like a sitcom or YouTube sketch. His once mythic presence becomes more everyday. He discusses daily routines, dances badly, and bickers with Donkey in short, punchy scenes that rely on timing and facial comedy rather than large-scale set pieces. Technically, he's gone from a groundbreaking CGI test case to a flexible digital puppet the studio can drop into almost any format, which is its own kind of evolution. Cameo Shrek. Shrek's design and storytelling role evolve again when he leaves his own movies and appears as cameos and Easter eggs in other projects. Because he now has an instantly recognizable silhouette, round belly, trumpet ears, short vest, other productions can reference him with simplified models, cave paintings, toys, or quick flashbacks without needing full film-level detail. A few steps over a log with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish are enough for audiences to load years of memories onto a handful of frames. In promos, parodies, and background gags, animators tweak his style to match new worlds. Slightly different line weights, color grading, or motion styles, so he fits next to more stylized characters while still reading as Shrek. At this point, the franchise evolution is less about upgrading his polygon count, and more about how flexibly that core design can plug into different visual languages without losing its identity. By the time Shrek 5 arrives, more than a decade of real-world time has passed, and both the ogre and the technology have aged. Behind the scenes, DreamWorks shifts to newer rendering and lighting tools that allow more realistic bounce light, smoother textures, and refined facial features, bringing Shrek visually closer to the modern look used in projects like recent DreamWorks films. His skin keeps its familiar green tone, but the shading and micro detail are more sophisticated. Clothing fabrics react more naturally to movement, and the world around him benefits from higher dynamic range and more complex reflections. On the design side, artists make subtle proportion and expression tweaks to age him up without breaking the icon. A few extra lines around the eyes and mouth, slightly heavier posture, and animation that occasionally favors slower, more considered movement instead of constant bouncy energy. In close-ups, the newer tech lets those tiny changes read clearly, so decades of story sit on his face even when he is just listening rather than roaring. Living Legend Ogre. Across 36 years, Shrek's evolution is both emotional and technical. From a flat, ugly joke on a page to one of the first CGI characters, to feel physically there in a fully lit, textured world. Each new era, theme park ride, TV special, musical, alternate timeline sequel, web short, cameo, and finally modern sequel, rebuilds how he is lit, rigged, staged, and even used in stories. The monster, the hero, the dad, the meme, and the aging lead are all layered on top of a design and animation toolkit that keeps expanding. That's the real evolution of Shrek. Not just a character who changes on the inside, but a digital creation that keeps learning new ways to exist on screen, while still feeling like the same grumpy ogre in the swamp.